So, Mun'im, I think we're in a position to hand over to you, and thank you very much for speaking to us. Your topic, I'll just read it. We gave him the gospel wherein our guidance and light, the Qur'anic Injil in classical and modern exegesis. Mun'im, thank you.
Thank you, Martin, for the kind introduction. So, hello everyone. Good afternoon or good morning. So, I hope everyone is managing okay. I'm so honored to have this opportunity to share my research that I'm working on. Let me begin by saying that my paper is still work in progress. I just finished writing it last week, so it is the work in progress in the true sense of the word. I have been and still excited about the topics of the Quranic view of the gospel and how it has viewed by Muslim scholars or Muslim exegetes throughout the centuries. Much has been written about Muslim views of the gospel or the Bible in general, but less has been written about the Quranic view of the gospel as has been understood by Muslim exegetes. So because of that excitement, that I wrote a quite long paper, 21 pages in single space, with no footnote yet. So I will not be reading, the whole paper, just perhaps the first part of it, and then say a few things about the second part. Let me share this. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So I'm interested in this question. What is the gospel mentioned in the Quran? This question has perplexed modern scholars as the Muslim scripture present an understanding of the gospel called Injil differently from that of Christians. While the gospel in Christianity is good news preached by the early Christians about Jesus, the Quran refers to the Injil as a revelation given by God to Jesus himself. The Quran does not say much about whether it was revealed in the same way as the Torah or other scriptures, including the Quran. The word Injil occurred 12 times in the Quran. In 9 of them, it occurred in conjunction with the mention of Torah or Torah as a scripture sent down by God. Twice, the Quran says explicitly that God gave Jesus the gospel, saying that we gave him, Jesus, the gospel, the wherein our guidance and light and confirmation of the Torah already revealed. In one passage, the Quran instructs the people of the gospel. It is the only passage in the Quran where Christians are called the people of the gospel and are encouraged to judge in according with what God has sent down in it. In one verse, understood as addressing the Prophet Muhammad, the Quran instructs, say, O the people of the book, you have nothing to stand on unless you observe the Torah, the gospel, and what has been revealed to you from your Lord. However, it is not clear what is the gospel with which Christians are instructed to judge, uphold, or observe. The Quran says so little, if any, about the content of the Christian scripture. This issue has been much noted by many scholars that the Quran does not provide much comment on the content of the gospel. However, it should be noted that the Quran does make allusion to what might be called as the content of the gospel. So at least there are 3 passages in the Quran that seem to refer to the content of the gospel. Namely, that the gospel predict the coming of the Prophet, of Muhammad, and promise heavenly reward for those who fight in the path of God. The Injil, the Quranic Injil, also include parable of believers portrayed as plant that sprout, become strong, grow thick, thin, and impressing the farmers. However, I'm not in, my paper is not about the content of the gospel or the Quranic gospel, but rather I'm interested in this question. What is the Quranic view of the gospel? How do Muslims view the Quranic Injil, which is always mentioned in singular, vis-a-vis the existing 4 gospels? Where do the Quranic exegetes derive their perception of the gospel? And to what extent their understanding of the Quranic Injil shaped and been shaped by their knowledge of the existing gospel. By focusing on this question, I will restrict my analysis of the Quranic verses that refer to the sending down of the gospel to Jesus. In the second part of the paper that I will not be reading today, I discuss the verse of the Quran that instruct Christians to observe it. So in the second part of the paper, I'll argue how theology is at work in Muslim exegetical work. However, before addressing this question, through close examination of exegetical work written by Muslims, classical and modern, I would like to first discuss what the Quran has to say about the gospel and why it says what it says. The Quran refers to the gospel always in singular. According to Sidney Griffith, the Quran uses of the term gospel or Injil in singular, I quote, betray no awareness of multiple gospels, end quote. As is well known in the Christian tradition, the Injil was recorded under the divine inspiration by 4 evangelists in the 4 canonical texts: the Gospel according to Matthew, the Gospel according to Mark, the Gospel according to Luke, and the Gospel according to John. All of them were written in Greek. Even the term Injil in the Quran is commonly understood to have been derived from the Greek evangelion, although the exact philological path by which the term in its present form comes into Arabic is unclear. Most scholars contend that the Quranic Injil is most likely an adaptation of the Ethiopic form of the word Wengel. So I'm interested in how the Quran envision about the gospel. Is it the Kitab like the Torah, or is it different from the Torah? And to what extent does the Quranic reference to the gospel or Injil in singular reflect its ignorance of the multiple gospel as suggested by Father Sidney Griffith? Of course, what is the word Kitab in the Quran is relevant to my discussion, and this has been the subject of much discussion among scholars. While most Muslim exegetes, if not all, contend that the word Kitab in the Quran should be understood as revealed book or scripture, Western scholars develop different understanding of the term Kitab. George Sell and William Moore, for instance, argue that in line with the traditional Muslim understanding, that the term Kitab is labeled for individual scripture as well as the category of scripture. Other scholars like Alois Springer and Hobart Grims take the term Kitab to mean heavenly book. Recently, Daniel Madigan proposed an original approach to the word Kitab, arguing that the Kitab did not the product, but rather the process by which God's knowledge and authority are made manifest. So what is at stake in the term Kitab, according to Madigan, is not about the origination of the revelation, but rather about God's engagement. So rather than static or fixed book, for Madigan, Kitab is the symbol of God's authority and wisdom. So whether the word Kitab signifies physical or metaphorical reality, the question remains, is the Quranic Injil Kitab? Most recently, Mohsen Ghoudarzi responded to the question with negative answer. He developed what he called as Two-Kitab hypothesis, suggesting that the Quran applied the word Kitab exclusively to the Mosaic and Muhammadan scripture, namely the Torah of Moses and the Quran of Muhammad, with the exclusion of the Gospel of Jesus. And he came to this conclusion after examining the occurrence of the word Kitab in the Quran, arguing that the Quran does not attribute Kitab to any of the Israelite prophet after Moses. There are many verses in the Quran that seem to support this Two-Kitab hypothesis. I mention few here, including chapter 4, verse 136 which seem to address the followers of the Prophet, who believe in God and His Messenger, and the Kitab that He sent down to His Messenger, and the Kitab that He sent down before. Here you see that the Quran mentions two Kitab, the Kitab that was sent down to Muhammad, and the Kitab that was sent down to Prophet before him. And there are, of course, many other passages in the Quran that refer to the sending down of Kitab to Moses, as well as the term Kitabu Musa, or the book of Moses, is also mentioned in the Muslim scripture. Perhaps the strongest evidence for the two Kitab hypothesis is chapter 2, verse 80, in which the Quran mentioned Jesus and Moses simultaneously, saying that indeed we gave Moses the Kitab and we gave Jesus, the son of Mary, the Bayinat. Here you see that the Quran referred to Kitab when talking about Moses, but it doesn't mention the word Kitab, but rather the Bayinat when it refers to Jesus. However, at least there are two verses of the Quran that seem to pose exegetical challenges to the two Kitab hypothesis. One of the two verses that seem to pose challenges is chapter 57, verse 27. Indeed, we sent our messengers with clear proof, and we sent down with them Kitab. You see here that the Quran referred to Kitab not as a book or reveal book sent down to Moses, but rather to the messengers in plural. Perhaps the second verse is more complicated, which is chapter 19, verse 30. Here, the Qur'anic Jesus himself says, I am God's servant. He has given me the Kitab and make me a prophet. Here, the Quranic Jesus himself claimed that God gave him the Kitab. However, Ghoudarzi dismissed this understanding, arguing that the term Kitab, when referring to Jesus, should be understood as the Torah. Well, I find these two Kitab hypotheses, persuasive. I find it difficult to apply this theory to Quranic verses that seem to juxtapose the Injil with a Torah and sometimes with the Quran. So I listed few verses there in which the word Injil is not distinguished from the word Torah. The Injil is not credited to Jesus on par with the Torah to Moses and the Quran, but rather it is also mentioned in the context of what Christians have in their possession. So the problem, I think, is that the Quranic view of the gospel is not as coherent than what is presented by Ghoudarzi. And this incoherent view of the Quran is more evident in Muslim commentaries on the Muslim scripture. And it is understandable since Muslim exegetes adopt an atomistic approach to Qur'anic text, in the sense that the Muslim exegete interpret the Quran verse by verse. And this atomistic approach to the Quran has practically dominated exegetical work throughout most of Muslim cultural history, although it has been viewed negatively by some modern Muslim scholars, including Fazlur Rahman and Muhammad Bakir Sadr, as I discussed extensively in my paper. So there are two sets of verses in the Quran that form the locus classicus of my research. The first is a cluster of verses of the Quran that portray Jesus as the recipient of Injil. And the second cluster is those passages of the Quran that instruct Jews and Christians to observe their scripture, which is the second part of my paper. So now, the word Injil first occur in chapter 3, verse 3. He sent down to you the book with the truth, confirming what has been sent down before, and he sent down the Torah and the gospel. And thus we expect that the Muslim exegete would discuss the term Injil in great detail, because it is the first place in which the term Injil occur. The earliest exegete whose work is extant today, Muqatil bin Sulaiman, simply says that God sent down the gospel to Jesus. However, he began his brief explanation by alluding to what seemed to be the occasion of revelation of the verse, namely Muhammad encounters with Christians of Najran who claim that Jesus is God. And responding to that situation, God revealed chapter 3, the first 3 verse of chapter 3. The 10th century Tabari referred to similar occasion, but he offered justification of why the Quran confirmed what has been revealed before it. The reason behind the language of confirmation, according to Tabari, is because the sender of the 3 scriptures is the one same God. He also argued that both the Bible and the Torah are 2 books or kitabani. So Tabari's identification of Injil with Kitab seemed to set the tone of later exegetes, although some scholars follow the footsteps of Muqatil simply by attributing the Injil to Jesus. What concerned later exegetes the most is about the origin of the term Injil. So the question of etymology began to emerge in the late 10th century onward. Samarkandi, for instance, of the late 10th century, and At-Tusi of the 11th century considered the word Torah and Injil to be derivative. Their understanding of the meaning of the term is based on the information given by Arab linguists. So At-Tusi, for instance, he relied on the work of Exegesis, Basran grammarian, who argue that the word Injil is derived from the word Najl, meaning a foundation. He goes on to say that فَسُمِّيَ إِنْجِيلًا لِأَنَّهُ أَصْلٌ مِنْ أُصُولِ الْعِلْمِ. It is called Injil because it represents a principle of the principles of knowledge. The Shi'i scholar At-Tabarsi of the 12th century also reject the idea that Injil is not Arabic. So At-Tabarsi emphasized the Arabicness of the Injil, arguing that for the Arab it is Arabic derived from Najala Yanjulu, which means it give rise, or it give birth to. So Tabarsi's strong defense of the Arabicness of the term Injil suggests that in his time there might have been scholars who consider it foreign word. Tabari's defense is grounded on theological conviction that the Qur'anic Arabic is the purest and the most appropriate language of the divine revelation. And interestingly, the Mu'tazili exegete al-Zamakhshari of the 12th century regarded the Torah and the Injil as ismani al-a'jamiyani takallafa istiqaquhuma min al-wara wal-najl, 2 foreign names whose derivative are imposed from wara and najl. Zamakhshari is convinced that the word Injil is an Arabized foreign word. As proof for this being non-Arabic word, he referred to Hasan al-Basri's reading of Anjil rather than Injil, which is not known in the Arabic word form. Another issue raised by Zamakhshari, which later became an important exegetical discourse, is the use of the term Nazala for the Quran and anzala for the Torah and the Gospel. In English, the two verbs are commonly rendered as to send down. Zamakhshari note that the two verbs reflect different mode of revelation, responding to his imaginative interlocutor in question and answer manner. He writes that وَإِن قُلْتَ لِمَا قَالَ نَزَلَ الْكِتَابَ وَأَنزَلَ التَّوْرَاةَ وَالْإِنْجِيلَ قُلْتُ لِأَنَّ الْقُرْآنَ نَزَلَ مُنَجَّمًا وَنَزَلَ كِتَابَانِ جُمْلَةً. If you ask why it is stated نَزَّلَ for the Qur'an and anzala for the two other books, I answer that it is due to the fact that the Qur'an was revealed in piecemeal, while the two books were revealed in complete all in one manner. In the post-Tabari tafsir, these two issues dominate Muslim exegetical enterprise. One is that whether Injil is Arabic or foreign word, and two, the gradual or piecemeal Quran and the complete all-at-one revelation of the Torah and the Gospel. Now, if the Injil is loanword, from which language is the word derived? While there is a broad consensus among Western scholars that the Arabic word Injil is ultimately derived from the Greek Evangelion, it is not until the modern period that Muslim exegetes come to the same conclusion. In classical Qur'anic exegesis, the origin of the word Injil is either Hebrew or Syriac, but none consider it from Greek. On the one hand, Ibn Atiyah or Ibn Hayyan, for instance, argue that both the Torah and the Injil are derived from Hebrew, and on the other hand, Al-Qurtubi narrate the report that they are Syriac. Among modern Muslim exegetes, the distinction between the origin of Torah and Injil is widely accepted. However, it is only among 20th century exegetes that the word Injil is understood to be Greek. The 19th century Iraqi scholar Al-Alusi distinguished between the origin of the word Torah and Injil, saying that the former is Hebrew while the latter is Syriac. Perhaps the first 20th century Muslim exegete to think of Injil as Greek is Jamaluddin al-Qasimi from Syria. In his brief commentary on chapter 3, verse 3, he says that a Torah is Hebrew, which means law, and the Injil is Greek, which means good news. All of the 20th century Muslim exegetes whose work I examine are all of the opinions that the Arabic word Injil is derived from Greek and the Torah from Hebrew. Not only that do they offer more elaborate description of the Qur'anic Injil, their depiction seem also reflect a scholarship of their time. The Syrian exegete Ibn Ashur provide a lengthy discussion on what is the gospel mentioned in the Quran. First, he characterized Al-Injil as name for revelation sent down to Jesus, which was then collected by his followers. And with this definition, he was able to identify the origin of the word Injil correctly, which is Greek word evangelion, meaning the good news, and also he was able to make correction of the misidentification made by early scholars. In addition, Ibn Ashur also challenged the common assumption that the two books, the Torah and the Gospel, were revealed all at once, especially as advocated by Zamakhshari. The distinction between Nazzala and Anzala, according to Ibn Ashur, has nothing to do with the nature of revelation or sending down. He writes, I quote, the Torah and the Gospel were revealed in piecemeal, just like other revelation given to all the messengers throughout their prophetic mission. That is the truth, because it is unthinkable that a book was sent down to messenger in one stroke, or daf'ah wahida. The Iranian Muhammad Tabatabai explicate chapter 3 verse 3 in light of other passages in which the word Injil occur, including chapter 5 verse 46, and he come to the conclusion that the Injil to which the Quran refer to and confirm is the four known gospel attributed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Concerning the nature of the Quranic confirmation, he write, I quote, the Torah and the Gospel found in the days of the messenger of God were the same Pentateuch and the same four Gospels that are known to us today. So the Quran confirmed the existing Torah and the Gospel. However, this confirmation, according to Tabatabai, is partial, not total, due to the many Quranic verses that speak of the omission or alteration of these two scriptures, end quote. Here we see how Tabatabai tries to harmonize the Quranic language of confirmation with other passages in the Quran that point to scriptural falsification. He also addressed the difference between the use of the word Injil, which is always in singular, and the fact that there are four canonical gospels. And this conceptual difference gives rise to the charge of Christians that Christians have distorted the original gospel of which the Quran speaks. I think I'm running out of time here, and come to the conclusion. While some
Mun'im, you're fine. You can take okay. A little while longer if you want.
Okay, sure. Yes. While some modern Muslim exegetes attempt to define what the Quranic Injil is, others pay more attention to the nature of sending down, as noted by Zamakhshari. As-Sawkani and Mutawalli Sha'rawi, for instance, make no mention of the controversy of the origin of the Injil, nor conceptual difference between the Quranic Injil and the Christian Gospels. Sawkani reiterated the view of the early Muslim authorities about the distinction between Nazzala and Anzala with respect to the different mode of revelation. For him, the Quran was revealed gradually, while the Torah and the Gospel were all at one. The Egyptian As-Sa'rawi tries to make sense of the fact that the two verbs, Nazzala and Anzala, are sometimes used to describe the sending down of the Quran. In his view, the revelation of the Quran followed two steps. The first stage, that the Quran was sent down in one piece from the preserved tablet to the lowest heaven, and the second stage, it involved piecemeal revelation to Muhammad over 23 years of his prophetic life. And this harmonizing technique is used by As-Sa'rawi to contrast between the Quran on the one hand and the Torah and the Gospel on the other. The latter are understood
Mun'im, you've accidentally muted yourself. You've accidentally muted yourself.
Okay, I don't know why that happened. So modern exegetes like Ibn Ashur, who reject such distinction, consider Jesus' Injil was one collected by his followers and do not make any connection with the question of scriptural falsification. Others, like At-Tabatabai, Rashid Rida, and Tantawi, who distinguish between the Quranic Injil and the existing Gospels, tend to resort to the Tahrif verse to solve the seemingly conceptual differences. The question remains, why does the Quran instruct Christians to observe the Injil just like Jews are asked to observe the Torah. If the Quran states that during Muhammad's lifetime the Gospel confirmed the Torah and contained guidance and light, how can it be corrupted? How are we to understand such vindication? So this is the question that I address in the second part of my paper, which basically focus on the notion that the Injil include guidance and light. And Muslim exegetes develop different exegetical tool in order to limit the light and the guardian of the Injil by arguing that if Christians follow the Injil, then they must confirm the prophethood of Muhammad. So the connection between light and guardian and the belief in Muhammad prophethood are for many Muslim certainly connected to each other. And if Christians read the Injil and follow the light, then they must confirm Muhammad prophethood. So in other words, that the belief in Muhammad prophethood that the Quran mentioned at least in two passages is understood by Muslim as a theological measuring stick to understand the Qur'anic the light and the guardian of the Injil. I think I can stop here, and I'm looking forward for the discussion. Thank you.